And here we go. Episode 129 of the PatteFacts streaming on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts from. It is August 26th, 2025. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm William Pattison. All right, we are back for my week zero takeaways as we have gone through the first week of college football, kind of in quotations. I know week one is this week, but we had college football on our TV this week. So I've got to talk about it. I've got to give my takeaways. I haven't had the opportunity to do this since the national championship game. So even if it's Hawaii and Kansas and UNLV and hell, Western Kentucky, those type of teams play this weekend, I'm still going to break it down. And I've got plenty of takeaways from almost every game this weekend. I mentioned Western Kentucky. I actually don't have a takeaway from that one. But McIver looks really good at quarterback. I think Western Kentucky could possibly win the Conference USA. And they had a really strong showing against Sam Houston. So there's my short takeaway. But I've got takeaways from all the other action and a couple of strong opinions on a couple of these games as well. So plenty to stick around for on a great edition of TPF. And by the way, we're on YouTube. And if you didn't know that, you must not have listened to the last episode, but that's okay. I'll give you a pass because we are on YouTube and you can watch me on our YouTube channel at the PatteFacts. All you got to do is look it up. If you don't want to listen, you want to flip it on your TV, you're doing some homework, you're just chilling on the couch after a long day of work. Hopefully I can entertain you with my takes. So make sure you're watching on YouTube. And if not, keep on using the podcast. But if you are on YouTube, like, subscribe, comment, let me know you're listening. And I appreciate it. It helps me a lot. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure you're following the podcast. Make sure you like and give us a good rating so that other people will see that, and send this to a friend or two. So, they can get involved in college football a little bit better, go a little bit deeper, as that's what we're trying to do this season. And make sure to follow at the PatteFacts on Instagram, TP Facts on Sports on TikTok, and at the PatteFacts on Twitter/X, so you never miss any bonus content outside of what we do on the podcast. So plenty to cover today. Let's get right into it. I want to begin with this, and it's my week zero takeaways from college football. And we'll begin in Dublin, where we had the Dublin, Ireland game. Once again, it's got some Irish phrase, the do or I don't even want to try and pronounce it, but you know what happened. Iowa State, Kansas State, a Big 12 battle. A lot of playoff implications in this game, even though it was in week zero, because Kansas State, the team that was projected to win the Big 12 heading into the season, Iowa State coming off a season where they were in the Big 12 championship last year. And there were a ton of big time game implications in this one. And the first half was very sloppy. Bad field conditions. It's raining. There were fireworks before the game. So apparently there was a gloom above the air, and that's what caused Dylan Edwards of Kansas State to muff the opening punt, which was a bad look. He ends up getting hurt. More so felt like he got his feelings hurt because he made a fool of himself. It didn't look like it was that serious of an injury, and I'm not trying to make a mockery of it. But you go back and watch the replay, it's like, well, where did the injury occur? And I get it. It's on a big stage, opening game of the season, first play for you of the year, and you muff the punt. But they needed Dylan Edwards. And if he was available to play in some capacity, he should have. And I get it's the first game of the season, but that's an important game, being a Big 12 matchup. And we'll get into more so what I think about Dublin and Big 12 matchups, conference matchups in general here in a minute. But just kind of going through the game recap, the Dylan Edwards injury was significant because he was a big time returner for this Kansas State team. So we have plenty of turnovers outside of that, though. Right after Edwards muffs the punt, Iowa State has prime field position. Rocco Beck swings it out. It's a fumble there. Kansas State recovers. And we had two more fumbles across the way. One by Rocco Beck and one by Kansas State's backup running back. And at halftime, it's 7-7 with four turnovers apiece, or excuse me, four turnovers combined, and just sloppy football. And a lot of people online were like, "Oh my gosh, how in the world are these top 25 teams And I was like, well, look, the field conditions aren't great. And these are two good teams that are battling it out. And I thought the defenses was what reigned supreme in the first half, at least. But after a 7-7 tie, second half was much better. 31 combined points between the two teams. Avery Johnson got it going in the air, touchdowns of 37 yards and 65 yards. Rocco Beck was able to dial in a really nice touchdown pass in the left corner of the end zone that gave Iowa State the lead. Although I didn't love his performance for the game, I thought he did show up in some pretty clutch moments. And I think really the turning point of this game was when Kansas State decided to go for it on fourth down, and they don't get it. They do a replay. He's still short, and Iowa State sits on the football the rest of the way, converts on fourth down. Fourth down was a big theme of this game where Kansas State goes 1 of 3, Iowa State goes 3 of 3, and they're able to convert in some really big moments. So overall, Iowa State gets the win 24-21 and gets a signature win in week 0 of the season, which is really, really big for them, especially after a season last year where they were just battered and bruised by injuries. It was incredible that they were able to make it to the Big 12 championship, considering the amount of injuries they had. And, there were some questions about this year's team. You lose 2 NFL wide receivers from last year, and Higgins and Noel. And I don't think they necessarily figured that out in game 1, but I did think Iowa State looked the part of a top 25 team and a team that's going to compete in the Big 12 championship. And for Kansas State, this is a group that had a lot of expectations. Last year was supposed to be the get it together year, the kind of go through the motions and figure out what this team is. And this was supposed to be the year where they really took off. That's why everyone had projected them to be in the Big 12 championship, if not the winner. And it was much of the same, at least in the second half of the season last year, what we saw on Saturday. And again, I'll dive more into that here in a minute. But I want to begin with my big overarching takeaway from this one. It actually has nothing to necessarily do with this specific game and what happened. And as cool as the matchup is in Dublin, it's a cool environment for the kids to travel to and get to experience and stuff like that. We should not be having conference games overseas in week 0 in Dublin. William, oh my gosh, you're such a party pooper. It was a fun time. We enjoyed watching it. I don't disagree. I thought it was a good matchup, but we don't need to have a conference game in Dublin, Ireland. The field conditions were horrible. It looked like week 17 of the NFL season, midway through the first quarter in terms of the field. You could barely see the logo. You could barely see the lines. That's not a good field condition. And as a result, the play was really poor in the first half. Now it stopped raining. In the second half, it was a little bit better, but the field was chewed up. It looked terrible. We build all these big time coliseums on campuses with 60, 80, 100,000 people. Why are we doing rivalry games and conference games in Ireland when we have these big ass stadiums across the country at every big time Power 4 conference team? What are we doing that for? And I don't think a game between 2 top 25 teams within their own conference should be decided on a field that poor in those type of conditions, and also on that type of travel schedule where these guys got there on Thursday. They were up all night the night before. They sleep most of Friday. And I get it, you could possibly get acclimated, but it's just like a weird schedule to have a conference game. I'm totally fine with Notre Dame and Navy playing as they did a couple of years ago. I know last year was Georgia Tech, Florida State, and that's 2 conference teams. But go back to like Penn State and UCF back in 2016. Those are out of conference teams. That makes sense. It makes sense to have out of conference teams play. But when every other game in that conference schedule is being played in a home environment or an away environment, depending on what side of the field you're on, why are we doing one game in Dublin that could have significant impact on the Big 12 championship and the college football playoff? It doesn't make sense to me. I'm not a fan of that. I'm a fan of Dublin games. I'm not a fan of conference games being played overseas in Dublin. I'm sorry. Because every other team is playing, they're allotted amount of road games. They're allotted amount of home games. in conference. They're not playing in Dublin. It's not like, once a week, Colorado and Arizona go meet up in Dubai. We're not doing that. They go play at Colorado or at Arizona. It might be it might not be a popular take, but just in terms of conference games, we should not be doing those in Dublin. My second big takeaway is Kansas State. Now, Kansas State was a team I was relatively high on. They were a top 25 team in my eyes. I had them at, I think, 16 or 17. They were one spot above Iowa State because I believe on paper they're a better team. And honestly, after Saturday, I don't think that's the wrong take either. I think Kansas State is still better, but they did not execute, and they continue to shoot themselves in the foot like they did last year. Kansas State got off to a 7-1 start last season, 6-1 start. It was either 7-1 or 6-1. And they finished the year off really poorly because they continue to have these same things occur over and over again. Penalties, lack of execution, and not taking advantage of opportunities. Turnovers were big on Saturday. Avery Johnson had a couple of fumbles, mishaps. That's poor execution, like they had last year. They did not convert on fourth down. They went 1 of 3. They allowed Iowa State to go 3 of 3 on fourth down. They didn't take advantage of opportunities to get off the field or extend drives. And I wasn't a huge fan of the let's go for it on our own 30-yard line with 6.5 minutes left in the game. We're only down by 3. What's the point of doing that? Trust your defense. Guys like Austin Romaine had a really solid day. Lean on those guys. And I know Iowa State has started to run the football well, really well in the fourth quarter, but you still have to lean on what your defense has done for a majority of the game. And it kind of felt like Kansas State was just punting on their confidence on the defensive side of the ball and said, let's just go for it on a 4th and 1 on our own 30. I didn't like that. It's just the little things that they did not execute on. And there were a couple of deep shots down the field where Avery Johnson put a good ball. And there were some drops. There were some misconnections. There was a 4th down conversion where Johnson zips one towards the sideline, goes right through the hands. And that would have been a 1st down. That would have extended that drive, possible points. Lack of execution, turnovers, penalties. I think Kansas State was penalized 6 or 7 times, and that's not a 6-7 reference. I think it was 6 or 7 times. So it's not a 6-7 reference, kids. And then you add in the, miscues and missed assignments and lack of being able to get off the field defensively. It just reminded me a lot of what we saw from Kansas State last year. And I thought this was a team that grew. I thought this was a team that was going to be more experienced in year 2 with Avery Johnson. And he didn't play bad, but I thought this was going to be a more polished game from him, even in the first half where he bobbled the ball a couple of times, took a couple of bad sacks, was behind on a couple of throws. And I get it. It's the first week of the season. It's not going to be all clean and pretty, but there are just too many characteristics from last year from Kansas State that continue to pop off the screen to me. And it's disappointing because, that's a big loss for them. That's a conference loss. So when you look at the rest of their schedule, there's some tough matchups to go. A Baylor is going to be a tough matchup. And you lose that game, now you're on the fringe of not even, making the Big 12 championship, let alone the college football playoff. And that would be 6 weeks into the season. So they really needed this one if they were going to legitimately push for a Big 12 championship and a playoff bid. And now they're behind the 8 ball because of a lot of the same characteristics they struggled with last year. We'll see how this team grows, but I think this is a more talented team than they showed up on Saturday. Let's talk about Iowa State because Matt Campbell deserves a lot of credit. Very ambitious on 4th down. I don't think I would have gone for it in that situation. I probably would have kicked it and gone up by 6 and forced Kansas State to march down the field and score. It's something they had only done a couple of times throughout the game. And 2 of those plays were because of big time busted coverages. You'd drop a lot of guys back with a minute to go anyway. So I would have been fine with it. But Matt Campbell says, let's go for it. We're only up by 3. Let's take a gamble. And they do, and it pays off. And I give him a lot of credit for that because Hansen was as well rested as can be in that fourth quarter because they did a good job alternating the running backs. And Hansen had a heyday to where Kansas State had no answer, could not stop him. And you've got guys like Austin Romaine, who are, is the best linebacker in the Big 12, who couldn't get in front of him. So I thought that was impressive, just the way he kind of formatted this game, even though it wasn't as clean as he wanted. Having Hansen come in fourth quarter basically with fresh legs was big, and it paid off with those gambles he took. And then I thought they responded well to the adversity they faced, to where they get a gift on their own, or I guess on the Kansas State 4-yard line early in the game off that muff punt. You assume they get points off of that, and instead they fumble it. But, it didn't really deter them. They continued to do what they wanted to do, and the RPO was really, really successful, especially as the rain got out of things. They were able to have a ton of success with that. And that was something that worked throughout the night, even on pivotal plays, going back to a big third down conversion on that final drive where Beck did a really good job of looking down the cornerback and waiting for the tight end to release. Yanks the ball out, makes a really good play. They did not let the miscues get in the way of how they wanted to finish the game and how they wanted to attack their game plan. So I give them a lot of credit there. And they do deserve credit for the win. I'm not saying that Kansas State necessarily just pissed it away. I just think they didn't take advantage of the opportunities like they should have, and Iowa State was able to continue to do what they wanted to do game plan wise and didn't let the turnovers necessarily affect. My big gripe, though, was Rocco Beck. And this might be critical, but Rocco Beck was the more polished quarterback coming into this game. I thought last year he had really gotten comfortable within that Matt Campbell offense. It helped that he had 2 NFL wide receivers, and I get he's missing that this year, and they're going to take some time to find that chemistry. But there were a lot of bad plays from Rocco Beck when you go back and watch this film. 14 of 28 on the day, did throw for 2 touchdowns, had a rushing touchdown, and showcased what he could do with his legs. But early in this game, had a lot of passes that were behind, too low, too high. And there were 3 or 4 plays that were like hospital balls where he just zipped it into too tight of a window and put his receiver on an island. I mean, to where his receiver could have been blown up if the correct angle was taken or if the guy held on to the football. Most of the times it was just such a bad play that it'd be dropped and go through, the defense too. But for a guy that I believed was the more polished quarterback in this one, Avery Johnson is good, but this is year 2. You're expecting him to take that jump gradually over the season. Rocco Beck, more established. 14 of 28 was not that impressive of a performance. He did have one really good drive where he went 3 of 3, 42 yards, and it led to a touchdown, which I thought was really, really strong. And that's the Rocco Beck that I remember from last year, especially towards the end of the season. But the hospital balls I thought were really bad. The timing and the placement throughout the game was just really erratic. And again, he's trying to figure out new chemistry with new receivers, but that's going to be something that's improved for Iowa State to be a legitimate Big 12 contender, because Beck is a big part of this team. And you heard Matt Campbell talk about it after the game. The reason why we went for it on 4th down, he said, was we had Rocco Beck. I trust my quarterback, which is totally true. And he lived up to those expectations. He made the right plays. But over the course of a game, you cannot throw the amount of just bad footballs that Beck threw at that level of experience. And that's going to be something they're going to have to critique as we move forward. So overall, a good win for Iowa State. Kansas State has a lot to, fix, has a lot to figure out in terms of how they don't beat themselves. I don't love that the game was in Dublin in terms of a Big 12 matchup, a conference matchup. That shouldn't be played on a neutral site in week 0, in my opinion. I get it. It adds a lot of hype, but a game like that shouldn't be derailed in the first half by terrible conditions, a poor field, and, just a whole lot of hoopla. Seriously, that first half was like something out of the Looney Tunes. It just was like, oh my gosh, you guys look terrible. And they're not terrible is the thing. But like you feed that to the common fan, and your Twitter timeline looks like what mine did. Just people just bashing them, calling them, terrible. No way these teams should be ranked. There's no way we should have a conference game in Dublin. We'll switch over now to Kansas. We'll stay in the Big 12. And 6-year senior Jalon Daniels threw for 176 yards and 3 touchdowns. 2 of them were to a newcomer in Cam Pickett, and Kansas opened up their new $450 million facility with a 31-7 rout of Fresno State on Saturday. And Jalon Daniels, the 22-year-old quarterback, 6th year of college football. I get it. It's a little crazy, but he played really, really well. And he's had such a tumultuous career, full of ups and downs and good moments and bad moments. And I think this was a really good moment for him on Saturday to finally get some of that swagger back, as he was 18 of 20, 47 yards on the ground. LaShawn Williams, an Iowa transfer, was really good at running back. And Kansas State ended up putting up 400 total yards plus of offense, which was really impressive considering what we saw this team look like at the beginning of last season compared to what they were at the end of last year. This was more the end of last year version of Kansas that, at least going into last year, I projected Kansas to be a top 25 team. And they played like that at the end of the year with wins like over Colorado. And that was a really big win. That was in Kansas City. Colorado was still in the college football playoff race, and Kansas derailed those hopes because they started playing really good football. And I get it. It's Fresno State, but they looked really, really solid on Saturday. And I want to talk about Jalon Daniels, and I want to talk about this Kansas offense because they were impressive. Jalon Daniels, at his best, is a top-tier quarterback in the Big 12 and deserves mentioning when talking about the top quarterbacks in college football. A couple of years ago, Jalon Daniels took the college football world by storm. He was incredible. And he's kind of put Kansas on the map over the last couple of years as a team that you no longer look at on your schedule and say, oh, it's Kansas. It's okay. Kansas, they got some speed. If Jalon Daniels is healthy, this could be a tough game. And Daniels is really, really good at making plays, extending plays, and he did that all Saturday. He had some really good pass protection from his offensive line that gave him the opportunity to kind of weave and maneuver. But a lot of those plays Daniels makes are just by his own intuition, by him extending the plays on his own. And you match that speed with a LaShawn Williams at running back and the Alabama transfer they have at receiver. This is a speedy team. This is a dangerous offense, a sneaky offense in the Big 12. And it all comes down to Jalon Daniels. If he's able to stay healthy, Kansas will be, towards the top of the Big 12. Maybe not like the top tier Big 12, but they're going to be a team that you've got to worry about night in and night out. And it's not going to be a bye game. Like, this is a team that could get hot. And offensively, you saw that Saturday where this thing was knotted up 7-7. Kansas drives down the field, scores. Fresno State responds. And then from then on out, it was just Kansas, 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 Kansas. And I get it. That there's a lot of season left to be played. This is Fresno State, a team that's in a rebuild. E.J. Warner did not look the part. Kurt Warner's son, former Rice and Temple transfer, that is, just did not look the part and put Fresno State in a lot of tough situations. But Kansas's offense delivered. I mean, 400-plus yards against anyone is a good day. And I thought the other big thing outside of Jalon Daniels just making plays was the turnovers. Because when Jalon Daniels hasn't been hurt, turnovers have been his big miscue, where that has put Kansas in a lot of tough situations. When he's really good, he's playing clean football and he's healthy. Just 2 variables. Last year, we got kind of 1 variable. We got either he's hurt or either he's making a lot of turnovers. Saturday didn't do either. He was healthy, looked good, looked fast, and didn't turn the ball over. And I think that's the key for Kansas to have success this season, is holding on to the football, continuing to push the tempo offensively, putting the ball in the hands of your speedsters and, running the offense the way it's designed to. And Kansas was impressive. I think Kansas was the most impressive team on Saturday. I don't think that's a crazy statement. The Big 12 is really good, but Kansas with Jalon Daniels fully healthy and not turning the football over, using their speed offensively, is a team to watch for in the Big 12. I think it's one of the sneakiest teams in this conference, and it was showcased on Saturday. I get it. It's Fresno State, but you got to put some respect on this team, and Jalon Daniels lived up to the hype. All right, we'll now move over to Hawaii, where I'm calling this segment Let It Rain. A little, nudge to the rainbows. Get it? Creative. Micah Aliando. Let's talk about him. Threw 2 touchdown passes, and Kansei Matsuwawa. I think that's the correct name. Kansei Matsuwawa made 3 field goals, including a 38-yarder as time expired, to help Hawaii beat Stanford 23-20 in the season opener for both teams. And Hawaii beat a power conference team for the first time since 2019 with back-to-back wins that year over 2 Pac-12 teams. It was Arizona and Oregon State. And then Hawaii won its first game against an ACC opponent, as the Rainbow Warriors were 1-4 all time against Stanford, all those games in Honolulu. And Alejandro got hurt in this game. I couldn't tell watching it if it was a concussion or a leg injury, but his head took a beating and then his leg did too. I thought he was in big trouble and wasn't going to return. And I started texting my friends because I bet on this game. Make sure, by the way, if you're a college football fan, you are falling at the PatteFacts for my picks every week, plus 20 units over the last 2 seasons. There's no reason why you shouldn't be taking them if you like to make money. Hawaii at 2.5 was one of my plays. So that's why I was watching it a little bit closer. And obviously, I've got some people that tail and take my bets with me. And I was texting them. I was like, we might be in trouble here. Alejandro is hurt and it didn't look good. And then like 3 plays later, all of a sudden he looks like Rocky on the sideline. He's running around. I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay, we're good. We're good. He's back. And he won this game on one leg. Went 27-39, 210 yards, 36 rushing. Pafale Ashlock had 9 receptions for 69 yards and a touchdown. He was really strong. And that's a guy that's a Blitnikoff Award watch list member. If you didn't know that, really good wide receiver for the rain. What is it? The Roaring Rainbow? Yeah, one of those. Right. No, Rainbow Warriors. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's 11:20. So give me a break. I've been working all day. Rainbow Warriors. But this is a really good connection for Hawaii with Alejandro and Ashlock. Like, that's a good duo. And I think this is the best Hawaii wide receiver, best Hawaii quarterback we've seen in a while. And the final minute 28 was really, really imperative of that, where Hawaii gets the ball in a tie game at its own 28. You got 133 to get it down the field. And Alejandro was literally limping down the field. And he goes 5 of 7 for 51 yards to set up that Matsuwawa kick and ends up going in. It's a huge win for Hawaii that has been waiting for a big game like this for a while. Obviously, they're building a new stadium here in the future, but it's kind of like a high school stadium, what they got right now. And they fill the place out because it's Stanford. It's a Power 4 team coming all the way to Hawaii. And you live for those kind of moments. A minute 30 to go. Can you get down the field? Can you get in position? And Matsuwawa knocks it in. And the coolest thing about this kicker, Matsuwawa, he learned to kick off of YouTube. He watched YouTube videos on how to kick a football. And he makes 3 field goals in this game and hits the game winner. I mean, how crazy is that? A guy that learned off YouTube. Maybe someone could learn from me off YouTube. I don't know, but that was really cool. And it's cool how this stuff comes out like after the game or during the broadcast. The broadcasters do their homework and figure this stuff out. So really, really cool. And I think this kicker is from Japan, I believe, ends up coming over to kick for Hawaii. Really, really cool that he learned off YouTube. But Alejandro, I want to go back to him because I know this is Hawaii and this is, not a power conference football, but this is a guy that was really, really impressive in only his second start. Now, we played in the bowl game last year, but was solid and was impressive, but you're trying to see what he's grown from during that time in the offseason. And he was really, really strong, especially only playing on one leg. And I talk about, how Iowa State was able to kind of battle through a lot of different situations. Hawaii, to start this game, allows a field goal in the first possession for Stanford. They call a fair catch in really bad field position. And then Alejandro gets sacked in the end zone, ends up being a fumble that is recovered by Stanford. It's a touchdown. So they get off to a really bad start in this game, and they were able to fight back. And Alejandro kept his composure, which I thought was really big for a young quarterback. And obviously, Stanford is not a good team, but for Hawaii, this was a big game. They had to continue to execute down the way, and that's exactly what they did. So I kind of battled here. What's my bigger takeaway? Is it that Hawaii has a quarterback, or is it that Stanford is a disaster? And unfortunately, I've got to be negative here, and it's that Stanford is an absolute disaster. Stanford, an ACC team, went on the road to Hawaii and lost. What are we doing here? Stanford's too good of a program to be in this kind of disarray. Frank Reich is their head coach, a former NFL coach. He might know X and O's, but he doesn't relate to 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. Frank Reich isn't firing up 20-year-olds to go play football. Frank Reich, I don't even think could hype up the bridge club at the country club. Or if he could, that's where he should belong. Andrew Luck being the GM, I think, is big because it's a face and it's a presence. But this is a roster that is nowhere near contention in any conference, let alone the Mountain West, let alone the ACC, where they actually reside. Stanford is a great program, long term, with guys like Christian McCaffrey and Bryce Love, just to name a few, just those, really strong running backs. I mean, we all know about Andrew Luck. Remember Toby Gerhart? I've got a framed picture of Toby Gerhart that's signed to me somewhere over here. But again, like, you're naming off really, really good players that they've had in years past. And they fired their old coach. Now they've been in kind of a disarray of trying to figure out what the next step is, what's getting better for them in the future. Right now, this team is terrible. And I think they've got the worst quarterback in Power 4 football. And that might be a generous thing to give him. He might be the worst quarterback in college football this season, period. Out of 136 FBS teams, he's horrible. And he threw this game away with a couple of really, really bad plays. One of them was so bad, it opened up the game for Hawaii, where Stanford is driving down the field in the final moments of this game, 3 minutes, something like that left, 2 minutes. And he throws an interception to the defensive end of Hawaii. Like, that's really hard to do. That's really hard to do. And he threw it right to him. And the game was flipped on its head after that. So Stanford deserves better. And this is a program that holds itself to a higher standard. And if I'm the ACC, I'm embarrassed watching what I saw this weekend. An ACC team struggling against Hawaii, losing to Hawaii. And that's not to give them a stray, but Hawaii's not a team that recruits at the level of an ACC team. Stanford's one of the best academic schools in college football. Stanford has a successful history of players that have worked out. They shouldn't be battling with Hawaii. Frank Reich, I thought, was a boring hire. A guy that may know X's and O's and may know the NFL, but isn't relating to young kids. Andrew Luck's a cool face, but bring in the right personnel and start recruiting at a higher level. It's a rebuild, but this is an ugly one. And this is the program that has been rebuilding for a while now. And the results still aren't there. Really disappointing loss for Stanford. And that's my bigger takeaway, that Stanford is a disaster. We'll wrap it up with the run-through Rebels. UNLV, the running Rebels, are now the run-through Rebels because offensively they're really good. Jaden Thomas, 3 touchdowns. Jet Thomas, you could call him. was really, really strong. And UNLV defense had 4 interceptions. I guess that's an impressive number. What's not impressive is the 555 yards of offense the running Rebels allowed to Idaho State. That's not impressive. And in Dan Mullen's first game as UNLV's coach, they won 38-31 at home against Idaho State. And Mullen's a guy that had success at Mississippi State, had success at Florida, is taking over a team that won 11 games last year. But keep in mind, there are only 2 starters returning from this team. It's a completely different group. I'm not bashing him for that, but I expected a much better performance from UNLV in this game. Jane Thomas was as good as advertised, 147 yards, 10 carries, 3 touchdowns. He's really damn good. 14.7 yards a carry is absurd. And then Virginia transfer Anthony Calandre went for 195 yards in the air, 93 yards rushing. Alex Orji had a really nice highlight where he hurdled someone into the end zone, but he also had a bad fumble to begin the game that was also in the end zone. A couple of bad miscues for UNLV, but offensively, I think they're fine, which is what Dan Mullen has always been. You know what you're going to get offensively. The defense is what you've got to work on. And it wasn't that big of an issue at Mississippi State, at least when they were good. Like they just like you go up against like an Alabama back when Dak Prescott and company were there. Like they were just a little bit outnumbered in those games, but they were still really good. They just didn't recruit at the same type of level. And you thought, well, maybe if Mullen sticks around, they can start bringing those type of guys in. Wasn't really able to achieve that. Goes to Florida, where the offense was really, really good. You did everything and more with the type of players that you had on that roster, but you couldn't recruit at the same type of level you needed to. And the defense was horrible and is what lost Florida a lot of games under Mullen. And it seems like it's a little bit of the same at UNLV right now, where this is a box of misfit toys, guys that were really highly recruited players coming out of high school, like a Justin Flo or a Denver Harris or a Jack Pope or a Chief Borders. Like there's so many guys on this roster, like where you just look at their name and you're like, hold on. That guy was like a 4-star like 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago. What is he doing here? But while they might have been talented years ago, they have not lived up to that throughout their career. And that was kind of what UNLV looked like defensively. They kind of looked like a product of the type of players they have on this roster. And Mullen did what he could coming over just, a couple of months ago, just trying to formulate a roster when you lose so many guys from last year's 11-win team. But the defense was really, really bad. And this is not going to be a team that's going to be competing for a college football playoff spot as a group of 5 bid if they continue to look like that. And Boise State here in a couple of weeks on the road, I guess a month or 2 on the road is going to be a really, really difficult matchup if you allow Idaho State to come in your own building and put up 31. I'm not worried about the offense. I think Andre and Orji both had their moments. They look solid. They can kind of plug and play there. Jane Thomas was really, really solid. I think, that's a guy to watch for. Could be an all Mountain West player at running back if it's not for what Boise State has in the backfield with guys like Sear Gaines and Blackshear or Blacksford, whatever it is. I think, Blackshear. But outside of that, the defense has got to be improved. And that was a really, really big concern. Imagine losing that game to begin the year. That would be a totally different vibe. But I do like Mullen. I think he's a good offensive coach. I think he knows how to get the best out of players, especially if they're not highly recruited players. But I do worry about the defense because that's what got him fired at Florida. That's what he struggled with in the latter half of the years at Mississippi State. If he doesn't improve that, then I think UNLV is in big trouble in a Mountain West that isn't necessarily loaded, but does have a couple of teams that could trip up on him. And UNLV is graced by the 113th easiest schedule in college football. Idaho State was a big reason why. You've got to go on the road to UCLA here. And if Idaho State did that to him this weekend, I don't know what UCLA is going to look like against that UNLV defense. So they've got to be improved there if they want to be a group of 5 bid team for the college football playoff. I projected them to be that, and I looked like an idiot this weekend. But, you do what you can. that's going to wrap it up for another edition of the PatteFacts, episode 129. Week one is on the horizon, and that's going to be a lot of fun. Trying to decide if we're going to do a weekly episode each week, breaking down this week's upcoming games. So, like a Thursday release, but obviously this week we've got some games on Thursday and Friday. So, we might have to kind of play it by ear, but I would like to start doing kind of anticipation episodes as well to kind of get everyone on the same page, maybe have something to listen to on the drive over there, something like that. But I do appreciate you listening along with me. Make sure you're following at the PatteFacts on Instagram and Twitter, at TPFacts on Sports on TikTok, and at the PatteFacts on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, like, subscribe, comment, make sure you get those engagements going. And I do want to say I appreciate all of the support I've received over the last couple of weeks on Instagram. We have doubled our following in under 30 days, going for 10K followers by the start of November. So hopefully we're able to achieve that. But I appreciate the engagement a lot, man. It really, really helps me out. Other than that, I'm William Pattison, signing out.